Game of Thrones had their convention this past weekend in Los Angeles, where Kit Harington showed up. He talked about Jon Snow. What did he say? What does it mean for the Jon Snow series? And where do we think it's going to go? We're going to talk about it right now. I'm your host, Sean. My co-host to my right, Sterling. What's up, buddy?
Not much. How are you?
I'm good. So we've been covering all things Game of Thrones, all things House of the Dragon, and certainly Jon Snow, as we're excited to see where the series is going to go and when it's going to be officially announced. And I thought it was important to talk today about the Game of Thrones convention that just wrapped up in Los Angeles. And we had all the House of the Dragon actors showing up. You had a great shot that we'll put on the screen of Paddy Considine, who played King Viserys in House of the Dragon, along with someone from his line of descent, and Kit Harington, Jon Snow. So I don't know if that would mean that he's his great-great-great-great-grandfather, but somewhere down the line. But and then what was interesting is two things that we'll talk about. One is why there may have been no official announcement of Jon Snow's series at the Game of Thrones convention. And two, we're going to talk about what did Kit Harington say when he said on the Q&A panel about Jon Snow. Now, a couple of things I want to talk about. First, from people that were there, they were specifically told when they went up to the mic to not ask any questions about the Jon Snow series, specifically. So if the series was not going to happen, nobody would have cared, so they wouldn't have told him. He would have just said, hey, you could ask him whatever you want, and he would say, I don't know anything about that. So it wouldn't have mattered. So the fact that they told him not to ask anything means it's happening. So, but there may be reasons why they haven't announced it yet. So in the course of a conversation, though, somebody asked a question of Kit Harington about Jon Snow at the end of season 8, and I think he had a very cagey way of talking about where we're going to find Jon Snow in the new series in a way that kind of referenced the end of Game of Thrones. And here's what he said. So first of all, did you watch it? Did you see the clip yet
I did
of
not.
Kit Harington? Okay, it's out there on YouTube and some other different platforms, but we can't necessarily show the video because someone has the rights to it. But it's out there. You could find it. So Kit Harington, in essence, said Jon Snow was in the cell in King's Landing, ready to be beheaded for what he did to Daenerys, and accepting it. He was ready to die, and he was done, finished, according to Kit Harington. So he gets a reprieve and gets sent to the wall. And so you would think this new lease on life, where's Jon Snow's head at? And so Kit Harington then says, here's a guy who's dealing with the trauma of him killing Dany, dealing with the trauma of losing Ygritte earlier in the show, who he loved, and the trauma of hanging Ollie at the wall. And so all these things happening, the guy has PTSD. He's completely wiped out from everything that's happened in his life leading up to this. And so Kit says, look, a lot of people wanted that thing wrapped up in a nice, neat bow. He's on the horse and they're leaving the wall to move north. And you want that little wink or a little bit of a grin, but you're not getting it because he's not okay. And those are the exact words of Kit Harington with Jon Snow. At the end of Game of Thrones Season 8, as the show wraps, he's in a bad place. He is not okay. And then Kit says, I find that very interesting, basically where this character is. And it's his way of telling you, this is the Jon Snow that you're going to find at the beginning of the Jon Snow series, a guy that is completely, questioning still, should I have killed her? Questioning who he is. He also talks about he's never accepted being a Stark because he was a bastard. He never accepted, even when he just found out about being a Targaryen, what does that mean to him? Or being a king. He's never felt comfortable in his own skin and who he truly is. All he knows right now is he's Jon Snow. And so, first of all, based on the comments that Kit made, is that the Jon Snow that you expect to see at the beginning of this new series that's going to come out? I mean, did anything surprise you there about his take on the character and where he is after the show ends, or after the original Game of Thrones show ends?
No, I mean, I don't really know what to expect. I mean, obviously you got to kind of address what happened. In the end, you just kind of see him walk away from the wall with Tormund and his wolf and, the wildlings. So Yeah, they're definitely gonna need to address all the trauma and everything you went through. Um, I'm sure that will lead into something, you know, it's just it's character development that he's going to need. You know, it's you're making a show on a character that he he had a I actually thought he had a pretty good ending. You know, all things considered. I mean, he got to go live with his friends beyond the wall, right? And a lot of people wanted to see him be, I guess the king of, ruled the seven kingdoms. But um, no, I think that's not really who Jon Snow is. He didn't want to be. He didn't want to be a king or a
And he
leader.
literally finds out who he is
Yeah.
right before the end of the show.
Right.
There's not much time that elapses between him and down in the crypts in Winterfell finding out from Sam that he's Aegon Targaryen to him killing Dany, like, and being sentenced to death initially, or then they give him a reprieve and he's sent north of the wall, or sent to the wall. But I think it's fascinating because I think he's dead on. I think Kit Harington knows this character, he's lived it, and I think it made a big impact on his life. And you can see that when you watch the interview and the Q&A. He gives a lot of thought to the questions that were really good questions. Some others he's a little cheeky with, but talking about the themes that are universal. The sorrow and sadness of losing people he loves, the potential for redemption and salvation, identity. I mean, he talks a lot about who is he. He spent this whole series, the original series, trying to find who he is. And the question is, he's going north of the wall and he still doesn't know who he is.
Right.
And so he's trying to determine for himself. And so he answered that question in a way that, even though the person was not allowed to ask about the Jon Snow series, but he answered in a way that tells you exactly where this character is going to be when this series starts. And so I thought that was newsworthy. I wanted to update you guys on it, as I know everybody's wanting to get as much information as possible as it comes out about the Jon Snow series. And then let's talk about why they didn't announce it at the Game of Thrones convention. So you've got Comic-Con coming up this summer. That's the big pop. Everybody's going to be there. You've also got House of the Dragon Season 2 that's going to start filming very soon. And so they can't even start any production on a Jon Snow series until after House of the Dragon wraps production. You're going to use some of the same crew, most of the same crew. I would imagine that's just makes sense. And so I think that they're also probably still editing the script. The last we heard from George R. R. Martin was that there was a third revision of the script. He made a comment about that the Jon Snow was in its third revision. So people that know about story development, the story's going to change by the time we see the production, and then it ends up hitting the screens on HBO. So for the Jon Snow series, I think that it's timing. They're not going to announce it right now and then have to wait a long period of time before they even start filming. They want to get that pop. And if all you do have to do is wait a few months to Comic-Con, you get the biggest pop, right? This was the first Game of Thrones convention. So, you're not going to get the biggest, return on your investment, so to speak, for announcing the Jon Snow series. So they got things to finalize, the final scripts, who's going to be involved, the casting, all that, the final contracts, all those types of things. So I think those things are fluid. And then, oh, by the way, keep in mind that we're also dealing with a lot of cost cutting right now with the larger parent company for HBO, right? So we've talked about that in other videos. So, there's no doubt they're going to put their money behind, you talked about the wider Game of Thrones expanded universe, right? The world building, doing the same thing with Harry Potter.
I think it's one of their biggest franchises.
Yeah, so
That
Jon
and
Snow's
DC is
happening.
what they have, yeah.
It's happening. It's just a matter of timing so they can get the biggest pop and get the announcement out there and get people really excited. So I think the logical answer to why it didn't happen at Game of Thrones first convention was the timing was not right for it. So I expect we're going to see it at Comic-Con. And at that point, House of the Dragon will be through with production for season 2, and will be in post-production, and the timing will fit. So announcement for Comic-Con is when I expect for the Jon Snow series, and we have an idea based on Kit's own words of where we think the show is going to start, where his frame of mind is and where he is as a character. Exciting stuff. We'll be here to cover it every step of the way. If you like what you heard today, leave a comment below, hit the like button, and most importantly, hit subscribe so that we can grow our content on the channel. And TCB.